Part 3. On a sweltering September morning in 1965, Filipino grape workers walked off their jobs in Delano, DLH, California. Their walkout would soon merge with a movement led by Cesar Chavez, 1927 to 1993, transforming American labor history. The agricultural valleys of California had witnessed many strikes before, but this one would endure. Chavez would guide farm workers through 5 years of boycotts, marches, and fasts. His methods would reshape how Americans understood both labor organizing and civil rights. Cesar Chavez entered the world on March 31, 1927, near Yuma, Arizona. His parents, Librado and Juana Chavez, operated a small farm and country store. The family traced their roots to Mexico, like many in the borderlands region. They lived modestly but securely on their 160-acre homestead during Cesar's earliest years. The Great Depression arrived when Cesar was 2, bringing hardship to farming families across the Southwest. By 1937, unpaid taxes forced the Chavez family to abandon their Arizona farm. The family joined thousands of displaced farmers migrating to California's Central Valley. They became migrant farm workers, following crops from field to field throughout the state. Young Cesar labored alongside his parents and siblings in vineyards, vegetable fields, and orchards. The family moved constantly, living in labor camps, converted barns, and makeshift shelters. Cesar attended 38 different schools before finishing 8th grade, his formal education ending there. Each school presented challenges for Spanish-speaking children in an English-only system. The fields taught Cesar lessons no classroom could provide. It witnessed contractors cheating workers out of wages, families poisoned by pesticides, and children collapsing from heat exhaustion. Labor contractors controlled every aspect of workers' lives, from housing to transportation to work assignments. The Bracero program, begun in 1942, brought Mexican nationals to work American fields. This federal program depressed wages and weakened organizing efforts among domestic farm workers. In 1944, 17-year-old Cesar joined the United States Navy, serving in the Pacific Theater. The military exposed him to a world beyond California's fields and labor camps. After his discharge in 1946, he returned to farm work and married Helen Fabella in 1948. They settled in San Jose, then later in the barrio called Salsipaides, meaning get out if you can. The neighborhood's name reflected residents' aspirations to escape poverty through education or steady work. Father Donald McDonald arrived at Salsipaides Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in 1951. The priest introduced Chavez to papal encyclicals on labor rights and social justice. McDonald also shared writings about Mahatma Gandhi's nonviolent resistance campaigns in India. These texts profoundly influenced Chavez's developing philosophy about organizing and social change. Around the same time, Fred Ross visited the barrio, recruiting members for the community service organization. Ross represented a new kind of organizer, trained in Saul Alinsky's confrontational but nonviolent methods. The CSO focused on voter registration, citizenship classes, and fighting discrimination in housing and employment. Chavez initially distrusted this Anglo outsider but gradually recognized Ross's genuine commitment. Under Ross's mentorship, Chavez learned to conduct house meetings, register voters, and navigate bureaucratic systems. His natural ability to connect with working-class Mexican Americans made him an effective organizer. By 1958, Chavez had become the CSO's national director, its first Mexican American in that role. He established new chapters throughout California and Arizona, building the organization's membership to over 10,000. Yet farm workers remained outside the CSO's urban focus, despite Chavez's repeated proposals to organize them. The CSO board feared that farm worker organizing would drain resources and invite violent retaliation from growers. This fundamental disagreement about mission would eventually lead to Chavez's departure. The early 1960s brought renewed farm worker organizing attempts throughout California. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, backed by the AFL-CIO, struggled to maintain strikes against powerful grower associations. Larry Ition and other Filipino organizers built networks among their compatriots in Delano and Coachelle. Mexican and Mexican-American workers remained largely unorganized, divided by language, legal status, and regional origins. Chavez observed these efforts carefully, noting both successes and failures. In 1962, Chavez made a decision that puzzled many colleagues and frightened his family. He resigned from the CSO's paid position to organize farm workers full-time without salary. The family's savings amounted to $1,200, their only financial cushion for this uncertain venture. Ellen supported the decision despite her concerns about feeding their 8 children. They moved to Delano, the heart of California's grape industry, to begin building their movement. Using his CSO training, Chavez conducted hundreds of house meetings throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Part 2 of 3. Chavez Delano-based organizing efforts initially focused on creating mutual aid networks among farm worker families. He founded the National Farm Workers Association in 1962, emphasizing services over confrontation. Members paid modest dues of $3.50 monthly, receiving death benefits and access to a credit union. This service-oriented approach built trust while creating the infrastructure for future collective action. The association's red flag bearing a black eagle became a symbol of Mexican-American pride. The grape strike that began with Filipino workers in September 1965 presented an unexpected opportunity. NAFWA members initially hesitated to join, fearing the strike would fail like previous attempts. Chavez convened membership meetings in Delano's Filipino Hall and Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. After intense debate, workers voted to join the strike, merging Mexican-American organizing strength with Filipino militancy. This multi-ethnic alliance proved more resilient than previous efforts divided along national lines. Traditional strike tactics proved insufficient against California's powerful agricultural industry. Growers quickly recruited strikebreakers from Mexico, housed them on company property, and hired armed guards. Local law enforcement sided openly with growers, arresting picketers for minor infractions. Chavez recognized that farm workers could not win through workplace actions alone. Drawing from Gandhi's campaigns and the Montgomery bus boycott, he developed a comprehensive strategy. The movement would appeal directly to consumers, clergy, students, and politicians nationwide. The Great Boycott, launched in 1966, revolutionized American labor organizing. Chavez dispatched farm worker families to cities across the United States and Canada. These boycott organizers told their stories in churches, union halls, and university campuses. They stood outside supermarkets, urging shoppers to skip the grape aisle in solidarity. Middle-class consumers who had never considered farm workers' conditions began connecting their purchasing decisions to social justice. The boycott transformed a regional labor dispute into a national moral crusade. In March 1966, Chavez organized a 340-mile march from Delano to Sacramento, California's capital. The peregrinación, or pilgrimage, merged labor organizing with Mexican Catholic traditions. Marchers carried images of Our Lady of Guadalupe alongside Union banners and American flags. The march began with 70 participants but grew to thousands as it passed through farming towns. Television cameras captured images of farm workers kneeling in prayer at each evening stop. Governor Pat Brown avoided meeting the marchers, but the publicity proved invaluable. Stanley Industries capitulated first, signing a contract with the NFWA just as marchers reached Sacramento. This victory demonstrated that growers could be forced to negotiate through sustained pressure. The success prompted the NFWA to merge with the Filipino-led Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee in 1966. The united organization became the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee, later simply the United Farm Workers. Chavez served as director while Larry Leong became assistant director, cementing the Mexican-Filipino alliance. The Yuma Vineyards Corporation emerged as the union's primary adversary by 1967. As California's largest table grape grower, Yuma controlled significant market share and political influence. When targeted by boycotts, Yuma borrowed labels from other growers to disguise their products. This tactic forced Chavez to expand the boycott to all California table grapes. The escalation required more resources but also broadened public awareness of the campaign. By 1968, millions of Americans were refusing to purchase grapes. Chavez's 25-day fast in February 1968 marked a pivotal moment in the movement. It began the fast to recommit the movement to nonviolence after increasing frustration led to property destruction. The fast took place in Delano's 40 acres, property the union had purchased for its headquarters. Supporters maintained a 24-hour vigil as Chavez's health deteriorated. Senator Robert Kennedy flew to Delano to break bread with Chavez at the fast's conclusion. The images of Kennedy and Chavez sharing communion reached audiences nationwide. The movement attracted powerful allies and equally powerful enemies throughout 1968 and 1969. Walter Reuther of the United Auto Workers provided crucial financial support and political connections. Catholic bishops endorsed the boycott, lending moral authority to the cause. Students organized support committees on college campuses from Berkeley to Harvard. Meanwhile, growers hired public relations firms to portray the union as communist-influenced and anti-American. The California Farm Bureau spent millions on anti-boycott advertising. Law enforcement harassment intensified as the boycott's effectiveness grew. Sheriff's deputies photographed all vehicles entering union property and followed organizers throughout the valley. Judges issued injunctions limiting picket numbers to 5 people per field entrance. The Kern County Sheriff's Department arrested hundreds of peaceful picketers on charges of unlawful assembly. Chavez insisted on filling local jails to capacity, straining county budgets and generating negative publicity. Each arrest strengthened the movement's narrative of nonviolent resistance against oppression. By July 1970, the pressure had become unbearable for most table grape growers. 26 Delano area growers signed 3-year contracts with the UFW, covering the workers. The contracts established hiring halls, pesticide protections, and wage increases of nearly 20%. The victory celebration in Delano drew 5,000 farm workers and supporters from across California. The impossible had been achieved through 5 years of sustained organizing and sacrifice. Part 3 of 3. The Delano grape victory of 1970 launched Chavez into a new phase of institution building and defending hard-won gains. Almost immediately, California's lettuce growers united to prevent similar organizing in Salinas Valley fields. The Teamsters Union, seeing opportunity in representing farm workers, began signing sweetheart contracts with growers. These agreements provided few protections but prevented UFW organizing efforts. Chavez called for a lettuce boycott while battling both growers and a rival union. The dual conflict would consume much of the 1970s. Chavez established the union's headquarters at La Paz, in Keene, California, in 1971. The former tuberculosis sanitarium in the Tehachapi mountains became a training center and commune. Staff members lived on site, receiving $5 weekly plus room and board. This voluntary poverty reflected Chavez's belief that organizers should share farm workers' economic struggles. The isolated location allowed intensive strategy sessions but also removed leadership from daily field operations. Some organizers worried about losing touch with membership needs. The California Agricultural Labor Relations Act of 1975 represented both triumph and new challenges. Governor Jerry Brown signed this first law granting farm workers collective bargaining rights in America. The legislation created the Agricultural Labor Relations Board to oversee union elections and resolve disputes. Initial elections overwhelmingly favored the UFW over the Teamsters, validating Chavez's grassroots support. However, subsequent Republican governors appointed pro-grower board members who undermined enforcement. The law's promise remained partially unfulfilled throughout Chavez's lifetime. Personal health problems increasingly affected Chavez's leadership during the 1980s. His fasting, initially a tactical weapon, became more frequent and extreme. A 36-day fast in 1988 protesting pesticide use left him severely weakened. Close associates worried about his physical deterioration and decision-making capacity. The union's membership declined from a peak of 80,000 pulgadas the mid-1970s to perhaps 20,000 by 1990. Internal purges of longtime organizers who questioned tactics further weakened organizational capacity. Chavez spent his final years focusing on pesticide dangers to workers and consumers. The Wrath of Grapes boycott launched in 1984 highlighted birth defects and cancer clusters in farming communities. It produced a documentary film showing children suffering from pesticide exposure in McFarland and Delano. The campaign never achieved the original grape boycott's massive participation, but it raised environmental consciousness. Chavez pioneered connecting labor organizing with ecological concerns, anticipating later environmental justice movements. On April 23, 1993, Chavez died in San Luis, Arizona, near his birthplace. He had traveled there to testify in a lawsuit defending the union against a grower's damages claim. Friends found him peacefully deceased in his sleep at age 66. Over 40,000 mourners attended his funeral march through Delano streets. Cardinal Roger Mahoney celebrated the funeral mass while farm workers carried the pine coffin. His son-in-law Arturo Rodriguez succeeded him as UFW president, maintaining family leadership. Chavez's organizing philosophy merged diverse influences into a distinctly Mexican-American approach. He adapted Gandhi's satyagraha, or truth force, to California's agricultural valleys. Catholic social teachings provided moral framework while Linsky's tactics supplied practical methods. His famous motto "Si se puede, yes, it can be done," coined during a 1972 Arizona fast, embodied this blend of determination and possibility. In a 1969 letter to grape industry employers, he wrote, "Our strikers here in Delano and those who represent us throughout the world are well trained for this struggle." The union's service-centered approach distinguished it from traditional labor organizations. Chavez established credit unions, health clinics, affordable housing, and Spanish-language radio stations. These institutions served members while building long-term community power. His emphasis on cultural pride through teatro campesino, farm worker theater, and traditional music strengthened ethnic identity. The movement taught Mexican Americans to reject shame about their heritage and demand dignity. This cultural organizing model influenced subsequent Latino political movements nationwide. Historians debate Chavez's complex legacy with increasing nuance decades after his death. His successful grape and lettuce boycotts demonstrated nonviolent tactics, power against corporate agriculture. The UFW's contracts improved wages and working conditions for thousands during peak years. His ability to unite religious, labor, and civil rights supporters created lasting coalitions. However, critics note his authoritarian tendencies, especially in later years when he purged dissenting voices. The union's decline during his lifetime raises questions about sustainable institution building. Contemporary relevance emerges as immigration debates and labor struggles intensify across America. Chavez's framework for organizing marginalized workers inspires current movements in logistics, food service, and technology. His environmental justice focus presaged today's climate activism linking labor and ecology. The ongoing fight for farm worker rights, including heat protections and overtime pay, builds on foundations he established. Modern organizers study both his successes and failures for applicable lessons. Two key takeaways emerge from Chavez's life. First, sustained nonviolent pressure combining workplace action with consumer boycotts can defeat entrenched economic powers. Second, successful organizing requires cultural pride in service provision alongside traditional labor tactics. Cesar Chavez transformed American agriculture by proving that society's most powerless workers could challenge its wealthiest industry. His methods merged spiritual discipline, tactical innovation, and cultural organizing into an effective force for change. While the UFW never achieved his dream of representing all farm workers, it demonstrated possibilities previously considered impossible. Today's struggles for immigrant rights, worker dignity, and environmental justice draw inspiration from the Delano grape fields where Filipino and Mexican workers united. As long as inequality exists in America's fields and factories, Chavez's example of turning suffering into strength through collective action remains profoundly relevant.